good. So we're gonna get started. I know we're a little late, but hey, it's fine, right? I'm gonna take off my shoes, or else it's gonna sound like I have high heels on as I go across the stage. So welcome everybody. Really excited to be giving a talk this early in the conference. My last two conferences, I was in the last slot on the last day. I hope there aren't any speakers in that slot here right now. The last slot on the last day of some conferences is reserved for me as a speaker and for everyone else to be checking out of their hotel room. So I love actually being early and having this many people in the room. And one second here, because I need to actually get my remote going. Sometimes I need to get out, back in. Hold on, guys. This is going to be more fun if I can move around. There we go. Cool. Yes, cool. So who am I? You guys saw the keynote this morning. So I do the Symfony documentation. That's my primary thing. I'm also a writer for the CambridgeUniversity.com tutorials. How many people have heard of Cambridge University before? Okay, good. This is, so 50% of you are voting for me actually being good at marketing. The other 50% are probably actually more accurate. But anyways, check it out. We have a lot of good stuff there. A lot of stuff I'm really proud of. Most importantly, she's right there. Yes. I am the husband of much more talented. Oh, man. What? We'll figure that out.
Good mark.
We've lost all power for some reason. Well, that's fine. Ooh, you got this. Cool. Well, this gives me the opportunity to plug in my computer anyways, because even though that was not my computer that just turned off, it was going to eventually. So I'll actually plug in. And that was my lovely wife, Leanna, who was up here prisoner. So everyone say hi, Leanna. Hey. Perfect. And we'll just kind of hang out for a second. Plug this in. All kinds of technical difficulties. So you guys are missing some of my. I'm just gonna keep going. This is we're gonna get the power back on probably, especially towards the end. There are actually some things I want to show you guys on the screen. But for now, we'll just describe my slides to you. So first thing is, I'm going to borrow a word from David Zulke, who is the nice guy sitting out at the Heroku desk out there. So please go talk to him. And the word is ephemeralization. It's difficult even for me as an English speaker. Ephemeralization, which is something he talked about at the Symphony conference actually in London. And ephemeralization was introduced by a guy named R. Buckminster Fuller, which is some guy in the 20th century who was sort of a philosopher futurist, and he dreamt about what the future might look like. And he had an awesome quote, which I will read to you now, since you can't see it on my screen. And he said, "We will be able to do more and more with less and less until we can do everything with nothing." And it sort of makes sense. We know as we have more tools, it allows us to do more and more things. And at the same time, a lot of those tools make things simpler. So we can do things with less and less time. And I actually have a math degree. So if we take this to the infinite degree in both directions, then eventually we can do everything with nothing. And that's the dream of technology, right? That's a really amazing thing to think about. So let's think about ephemeralization in terms of measuring things, measuring distance. So first, when we measured distance, we used a ruler, right? And this is very simple. And we could measure things only up to a certain distance, though, because if I need to measure something that's 1 kilometer, then I need a ruler that is 1 kilometer, and that would be very difficult to fit into a room or fit into my car. So it has a shortcoming. It's very simple, but we can't do much with it. So next thing is, we had, instead of a ruler, we had a kind of like a rope with a measurement on it, so something we could coil up and take. And so this we could actually measure further, because we could have this rope, and we could extend the rope maybe not 1 kilometer, but maybe 200 meters or something like that. So this allowed us to do more, but it still couldn't do as much as we needed, because for example, if you take a rope over a long distance, it starts to do this, right? And so actually you start to lose accuracy. So we can't do as much with it as we want to. So next thing with measuring, I have to follow my slides, even though you guys can't see them. They're beautiful, by the way. Leanna helped me do them. They're really something. We'll post them online afterwards. So next thing is we get the, I remember what they're called. The picture is worth 1,000 words. These surveyors, you know, who are at the side of the road, who are looking through things, measuring distance. We have survey machines. So all of a sudden we can measure as far as we can see. So we can measure a lot further. And in many ways, this will sound wrong initially. This is a simpler machine than before, because all you need to do, if you have an advanced one, is sort of look through something, and it's going to tell you the distance. It's going to say that thing that you're pointed at is 150 meters away. Now, it should seem more complicated, right? Because you're thinking, well, this involves mathematics. This, if it's a new machine, it involves computers. It probably has a microchip inside of it. But there's a difference between complexity and visible complexity. So what they've done with that is all of the complexity is something that's inside of the machine. It is complex, but the visible complexity is much lower. For me as a user, I can just point this at something and it tells me the distance. So to take this one step further, now we have, we have the technology with GPS to basically see as far as we want. So I could have an app on my phone or some device like that. It's going to actually use satellites to figure out the distance between one spot and another. And all of a sudden I can measure as far as I want. I can actually measure, even as the Earth curves, I can measure from point A to point B. And this is infinitely more complex. There are satellites. There were shuttles that needed to blast those satellites into space. But the perceived complexity, the visible complexity, is actually much less. I can just open up something and say, how far is it to that point? And it just tells me. So my last example of this is actually, since I stole the word from David, and he works at Heroku, is actually Heroku itself. Heroku is something that takes, it's a platform as a service for deployment. Of course, the complexity behind Heroku is incredible. They use Amazon, they use all these services, many servers across many different availability zones, we all know that kind of stuff. But for us as developers, the actual visible complexity is actually lower. It's actually very easy to deploy. So if we think about, let's think about a phone, like the iPhone, or an iPhone app. The authors of, I'm such a programmer, the creators of the iPhone or an app for the iPhone, they want to help you do more with less. And less is not necessarily about size, right? Probably everyone here has a phone that's bigger than this, right? If less were about size, we would have tiny phones. Less is actually about less effort, less drain on my patience to accomplish a task, less barriers to entry to accomplish that task. So for example, if we think about chatting to our friends, sending a chat message to our friends, that's a very busy space. There are many solutions for that. But for example, Snapchat is incredibly successful in this. And one of the reasons why is because they made it even easier to send chat messages. So what I mean is, they made it so that it took even less time, less energy, and less barriers to send chat messages. So there's a word for all of this. So all this idea of let me create a product that takes less time and less energy so that we can do more. It's user experience, right? When we think about user experience, they're thinking about, oh, hey, that was cool. I only wish that I had paused right before that moment and said something very profound. So we'll see if we get the slides going. So we think about user experience. It's about, obviously the name describes it, but really it's about less barriers and making that process easier and take less energy. Sometimes that actually means making it more fun. If we think of an app, there's two things I want to point out. One, none of us read documentation before using Snapchat or an app. It's just intuitive. The second thing is that the app itself might be fun. And making something fun is actually a better user experience. And it actually means I need less mental energy to get through a process. So making something fun is actually a way to get more done with less mental energy. Because I'm going to be like, ooh, I can send a chat message, not like, oh, God, I got to open the app and then do this and do this and do this. So, hey, I have slides. Perfect. So let's apply this to Symfony. I want to do more with less. So like before, less is not necessarily about less code written. Less is about development time. It's about less learning curve. It's about less complexity in our application. So when we open up our file, we think, yes, that actually makes sense to me. This is a very clear thing here. So ultimately, the goal is I want all of us to build bigger and more interesting applications with less time. And we know this is a requirement for our industry, because if we look at the websites we were making 10 years ago, they were very simple. So we know that the websites are going to get more and more impressive, but that doesn't mean that, well, we need those to take less and less time. We need to be able to stay competitive and build more interesting things. So this is about developer experience. So you think about taking less time, less development time, less learning curve, more clear code inside of your application. That's all about having a better developer experience. So if we apply this idea of having a better developer experience, I think we're actually going to get to the spot where we're creating bigger and better things with less time, less energy, and less code. So first, complexity. Definition of complexity is consisting of many different and connected parts, which makes sense. We can think of a database schema, right, with lots of arrows in between our tables. That would be a complex database schema. So simple versus easy. So these are two terms I want to talk about a lot. The definition of simple is easily understood. The definition of easy is close at hand, meaning it takes very little effort to do something. I push a button and it's done. So simple is easily understood, easy is close at hand. So an example, losing weight is very simple. All you need to do is eat well and exercise. I don't know what the big fuss is about all the weight loss, this, weight loss, that. It's very simple. We all know that, but it's not easy. All of a sudden, I need to wake up before my job in the morning and go for a run. Gross. I need to actually eat well. I can't eat a donut. None of those things are easy. So it's simple, but not easy. Another thing, how many Drupal people do I have in the crowd? Drupal, yeah, okay, a decent bit. So for example, Drupal hooks, the classic Drupal hook system, I would argue is very easy, because all you need to do is just make a function with a special name, and that's it. And Drupal will automatically call your function at whatever process you want to hook into. But it's not necessarily simple, because there's a lot of magic layers. If you create that function, it might be working, but it's not obvious how it's working. There's a lot of layers and magic going on behind the scenes. So that's easy, but not simple. So another example, you guys are all Symfony developers, so I'm sure that you use open source bundles. So if we have a bundle, and that bundle has very clear and simple instructions, meaning to install it, you run this step. To use it, you do this. Here's a common use case down here, which you probably need. And it's laid out in a very simple, easily understood way. Then using that bundle is going to be easy.
which means it's going to take very little effort. So simple instructions lead to an easy, not a lot of effort, ability to use that bundle. So inside of Symfony, I think I had one more point on this slide. Symfony itself is actually very simple. If you take away all the layers of Symfony, there's nothing left but a route, which calls a controller, and a controller returns a response. That's it. If you look at Silex, that's the core of Symfony. You can't get any more simple than that. So the goal inside of Symfony, and by the way, I think what makes Symfony special is that simplicity, and not getting us back, but emphasizing that simplicity and celebrating that simplicity. Simplicity is what we want first. Then we want to make things easy. Simple first, then easy. By the way, if you guys Google right now for simple versus easy, you'll see people talking about this. They'll say, okay, what's really hard is to make something simple first. It's very easy to make something easy. I said easy to make something easy. It's easy to make something easy. You just make a lot of magic, a lot of shortcuts, boom, it works. It looks good. It's very difficult to make things simple. So in Symfony, I want us to make things simple first, and then see if we can make things easy afterwards. So this is where the Developer Experience Initiative came out of, because I was looking around. I wasn't the only person. I was looking around at the Symfony ecosystem and saying, I think things can be simpler. I think we can make our life simpler. We have really nice layers, really nice tools, but we can make things more easily understood. So let's look at Symfony 2.0 to 2.5. So one thing we had was really long names. So obviously we usually put our bundles inside of a vendor namespace. You can see rendering a template down there. I have this long bundle name. I have the 3-part colon syntax. So you guys are all hopefully familiar with this. By the way, if you're looking at long names and saying, why does that make it less simple? There's also something about, Fabian talked about it, about conceived complexity, which for experienced developers is not a big deal. If I show you that template name down there, everyone here says, yeah, no problem. That makes sense to me. But for beginners, they see something long, and they say, that's hard. I don't like that. I don't like it. So when I talk about shorter names and less directories, I'm talking about the perceived complexity. And honestly, that's one of the things I hear most. Actually, let me go to, well, it's a couple slides up here. Yep. There we go. Actually, this is a good slide for it. So we also have many, many files. So this, if you look closely, is actually all of the files that you would need to touch to create a simple hello world page that renders a template and uses one custom service. And that's it. So that's about 9 files are there. So this is another thing where beginners look at this and they're like, whoa, man, that's really, really hard and really, really complex. Of course, once you learn it, it's very logical and it's not a big deal. But this is the perceived complexity. It's one of the biggest complaints I've heard about Symfony. And even when I give trainings after 2 or 3 days, I'll ask, where does the template go? And they can't remember because they're trying to balance so many different paths of where things go. So third thing is we also have scattered files. So we have top there, we have routing that goes in bundles, routing that lives in the app directory, templates that live in different places. Again, for many of us, maybe not that big of a deal. It makes sense. But it brings up that perceived complexity. And of course, we have, in a lot of cases, bad bundle readmes. So how many of you guys use the Vic Uploader Bundle? Very few of you. If you are uploading files and using Doctrine, then it's something you should probably use. It makes it very, very simple. So this used to be the installation for the Vic Uploader Bundle. It's not that way anymore, thanks to the Developer Experience Initiative. So they said, OK, you want to welcome to the Vic Uploader Bundle. You just met me, and you want to use me. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say installation. And then below, in case you forgot what we were doing, I'm going to remind you that these are the installation notes. So we already have two headers up there, which I love. Very programmery of us. Then it tells you to, let's see here. Oh, yeah, I love it. So then it tells you to put things into Composer. OK, cool. And it also reminds you to update your deps file. okay, I don't even have a deps file, so I better create a deps file. And now I need to learn more about this deps file, so I'm going to Google Symfony and look for it on Symfony.com's documentation. What the heck? They don't even have documentation about the deps file. Like, Symfony documentation sucks. By the way, for people that have no idea what that deps file is, it's because it's from Symfony 2.0 and has not existed since then. So this is insane to have this inside of your documentation. Then we keep going. OK, great. Next thing I need to do is auto-load my namespaces. This is also something from Symfony 2.0, so 4 years ago. You do not need to do this anymore. If you try to do this, this will not make any sense to you. So we're taking our new users, and we're basically not giving them a chance. And for all you guys that are experts, you know how to navigate past these things, so it's not a big deal. So the DX initiative asks, how could this problem have been solved in a simpler way? And this is something that, let me back up. The entire purpose of this talk really is about explaining a little bit of the why, so that you guys, who are a special group of developers, because you're actually at a Symfony conference, can carry the message out to the rest of the world that we want to ask this question about every part of our development process. How could the problem I just solved have been simpler? And then thinking about that, and then going and taking action with that, so we can make the entire process simpler. Or how could we do this new thing with less code, less effort, and less barriers, which means, of course, documentation, also how the library itself works. So here's the, so we decided that we had this problem, so we started the Developer Experience Initiative. By the way, I don't know who actually invented that term. It's a Symfony mystery. I did not develop the term Developer Experience Initiative. It sort of came out of nowhere. So if somebody can track that down, a Symfony historian, who said that term first, I have no idea. So developer experience, we came up with a very complex process, just kidding, for this Developer Experience Initiative. One, you say, well, that kind of sucks. That was way too hard. I did not enjoy solving that problem. So this is the problem that Fabian talked about this morning, the ICU problem, which if you haven't experienced, it's just really annoying problem. And so Javier said, here's the problem. It sucks. I don't like it. I'm not even going to fix it. I just want to report that this is a developer experience problem. Step 2, we fix it. So in this case, our friend Bernard says, hey, I can take care of that for you. So he works and fixes it. And then step 3 is we just all celebrate. So then you get a blog post about you or about the problem, and then people make these really nice comments and say how awesome you are, and you feel really good about it. And because Symfony is used by a lot of people, you've now solved this problem for hundreds and thousands of developers. So you can actually start to imagine how many man-hours did I just save the world. It's like a service to humanity. You can think of it that way. Amazing. Oh, and then just repeat. That's it. It's such a simple problem. It's almost like code refactoring in a sense. You just look at something, say, I don't like that, and then we fix it, and then you say, yay, and then you go back and say, I don't like that either, and then we fix that. And by iterating over this process, life just gets better for all the thousands of developers that work on Symfony. So let's look at some stuff that's been done for Symfony 2.6. By the way, Symfony 2.6 is the best Symfony release by far, ever, hands down. The amount of things that have been added, the amount of things that have been made easier is incredible. One thing I will not show here, because it's not even part of the Developer Experience Initiative, but it's the var dump component, which you maybe played with or maybe have not played with. In Symfony 2.6, there's a new function called dump, a flat function. I know. How un-Symfony-like to have a flat function. It's meant to replace var dump, and it's incredible. So when you do play with 2.6, use the dump function. It's awesome. It actually, among other things, will dump this beautiful output of whatever variable you're dumping into the web debug toolbar. So side thing, it's an incredible feature. So one thing, so let's just go through a few things that have changed. We now in Symfony 2.6 have a Twitter Bootstrap form theme. Why? Because there were hundreds, not everyone, there were hundreds, if not thousands of developers who were trying to solve this for themselves. How hard is it to do a Twitter Bootstrap form theme? It's actually pretty hard. You need to know a lot about the form system, and there's a lot of, you have to customize the label, customize the row, customize widgets. There's a lot of work. In Symfony 2.6, it's done, because that's a problem a lot of people had. By the way, if you have this problem and can't use 2.6, it's just one file. So go to GitHub, download the one file into your Symfony 2.3 project, and you can use this. Password encoding. How many people have done password encoding before you save something to the database? Yeah, a decent bit. Do you guys enjoy that process? Well, once you know it, it's not that bad. That's the lesson here. We need to almost back up and say, how would this have been? I know how to solve this problem, but how would this have been for a beginner? So in Symfony 2.5, you needed this encoder factory. You asked it for another object, and then you encoded the password. In Symfony 2.6, you just ask for a password encoder service, and you call encode password on it, right? That sort of makes sense. So these are simple things, but they add up tremendously. So another thing, making a login form. So if you have a normal Symfony HTML login form, we have documentation on how to do that. It's just a bunch of boilerplate code that you put into a controller and a bunch of boilerplate code that you put into a template. Okay? This is how it looked in Symfony 2.5 and before. In Symfony 2.6, it looks like that. And that's it. Because what that boilerplate code was doing was basically trying to figure out if you had an authentication error because you just typed in the wrong password, and also what was the last username that you typed in. That's it. That's all the controller was doing. So now we have a little service that helps you do that, and you pass the last username and the error into your template. So these are simple things. As soon as you see it, you're thinking, why didn't we just do that all along? Why did it take so long? And exactly, like there's so many opportunities like this that we should have done years ago, but we actually need to step back and recognize these problems and then fix them. You can imagine how long it took this person to implement this. You know, even getting all the tests to pass and that, maybe an hour or two. This is easy. This is just a service with a couple methods in it. It's not that hard. Another one is missing translations logging. So that's something I hate about translations. I create a new key, I forget to translate it into a language. So that's something that's there. Now you can actually log on production that this key just got translated into French, and we don't have a French translation for that. So you can actually check that on production. Simple stuff. This is a cool one. We have Ajax calls in the web debug toolbar in Symfony 2.6. So that's a really, really awesome one. And my favorite thing is, most of you guys probably know this, but even Ajax calls have a profiler attached to them. So with this, you can see as the Ajax calls are coming up, you have a profile link for each of them. So you can click in and see the profiler for that Ajax call. So you can see what database calls you made and whatever else you need to look at inside the profiler itself. Voters. This is one of my favorite ones. How many of you guys have created a custom voter before? That's wonderful. A lot of hands. So if you have if you ever have logic that says I need to be able to decide if a user can do something, but it depends on an object, like I can edit this blog post, but I can't edit that blog post, that's the use case for a voter. Before Symfony 2.6, this is how your class looked. Okay, so this is how it started. And then you had this. And then you had that. And this is all boiled down now thanks to an abstract class down to this. And that's it. It's just pure business code logic. So if you look at this, it says, hey, it's got some logic on, hey, if this post is private, then you can or can't view it. It's just business code logic. So really, really simple. I probably created 50 voters before it ever even occurred to me that maybe this was not a great process. Couple more good ones. This one is awesome. This one sounds so boring to you guys probably, but this one is awesome. So assets : install, right? You have assets : install, and then you have assets : install -- symlink if you want to symbolically link it. You should want to symbolically link it unless your file system doesn't support that. So this actually came from Easy Publish, which is built on top of the Symfony framework. And because symbolic links are much more useful than copying files, in their installation process, they were, I think, automatically doing -- symlink. And then because of that, Windows users were blowing up and all kinds of bad things were happening. So in Symfony 2.6, you don't have to worry about that. You just run assets install, and it figures it out itself. That's it. It says it tries to make a symlink, and if it can't make a symlink, then it falls back to copying the files, and then it prints out a message that says, I could not create a symbolic link, so I copied them for you, just to let you know. And that's it. That's how it always should have worked all along. Another one, Composer. Hey, Jordy. This is one that Jordy actually helped me with. So as of now, you can actually say Composer require and a library name with no version, and it'll figure out the best version to include in your project. And that's it. It'll even use the tilde operator to try to figure out, so tilde 2.5, something like that. So we don't need to do that. And this is nice because now Composer works like every other package manager on Earth. I don't say apt-get install PHP 5, but I want the version that was installed that came out October 3rd or something like that. You just say apt-get install and then the library name. So that's a lot easier. The Symfony installer I won't talk about because you guys already saw it, but this one for me is really, really huge. And then last, this kind of deals with the best practices. By the way, if you have any questions or want to chat about the best practice stuff, please find me afterwards. I would love to talk about them. But the biggest thing, it seems so silly, the biggest thing that I wanted to accomplish as I was helping with the best practices is to have less directories, because it's the perceived complexity. So this is a Hello World, very simple Hello World application right now, fully expanded, before the best practices, and this is what it looks like afterwards. So before, after, before, after, before, after. Those are the same files. That's accomplishing the same thing. So there's not really, when you look at the best practices, there's not really much different. We just thought, hey, if we move this over here, we could actually delete those 3 directories and have everything inside of one spot. So this is a huge thing for me. So what's next for DX? We worked really hard for 6 months or so, but this is absolutely an ongoing process. Symfony is, like we said in the keynote, Symfony is not where it should be. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Symfony needs to be much further in terms of developer experience. We need to always be questioning developer experience. And again, to go back to easy versus simple, why did I take so much time to explain that? Symfony, we want to make things simple. It does not necessarily mean add shortcuts everywhere. That's easy. Maybe we would do that in some places, or most of the time in Symfony, we would leave that to you as a developer, or leave that to a third-party bundle to add all kinds of magic and shortcuts. But Symfony itself should be very simple to use. And all of our tools around Symfony should be very simple to use. So first, of course, we're going to continue to improve Symfony. And that includes all of you guys asking that question, could that have been simpler? And if it wasn't, and I'll mention this again in a second, if it wasn't simple, if it didn't seem like it could have, like it was the best way to solve something, then what you could do is actually just open up an issue. And this is actually the main goal of the Developer Experience Initiative, is actually to encourage the entire community. So again, you guys are a special group. So I want you guys to go and spread the word to coworkers and other people you know. The main goal is to have people actually question that process and say, that's not good enough. I don't know how to fix it, maybe, but I'm going to open up a developer experience initiative and say, like, this should be better. And that spurs that whole cycle. Also, community bundles. Symfony is this. The entire ecosphere of bundles we use is this. If we only worried about Symfony, then we're not doing anybody a service. So we need to think about all of the bundles that are important to the core of Symfony and actually make those very, very good. And this means that they have documentation that makes sense, installation documentation that makes sense. It also means that they cover that very common use case. So that's another thing. Like, what is the most common use case? If you were going to install a menu bundle, what's a common use case for a menu bundle? Maybe you want to have breadcrumbs or something. Are we actually addressing that with that library, both in features and in documentation? And of course, the third step is really blogs and documentation. And again, this goes back to those use cases. What is the actual problem that you solved? The real world problem that you solved that you know other people have. First, can that be made simpler in the core code? If it can, great, let's open up an issue. But that's not always the case. Sometimes problems are complex. It's just a complex problem. So let's take that use case and let's turn it into documentation. That goes back to my thing this morning in the keynote when I said I want to answer all of the how do I do X. So as you guys figure out how I did X, that's the kind of things we want to get up there. And we invite you to put them on the official documentation. But we also know that people like to put them on their own blogs, and I think that's just as good. So just go on your own blog as well and write something out. And by the way, if you write a really good article on your blog that solves a really good problem, and you think that in the official documentation it would be beneficial to link to your blog, we will absolutely consider that. The Symfony documentation is not meant to be only Symfony official stuff. If you are the de facto source on solving a problem, I want to show people your source, because that's where people need to go, not the official documentation in that case. So ultimately, you guys, we are the ones driving DX, because we're the ones we're the developers. We're the ones having the bad experience or the good experience. We're the ones asking the questions, can this be done better? And so this means actually improving the READMEs on the bundles that you guys use, improving the features on the bundles that you guys use, improving the documentation on all of these types of things, and ultimately opening those DX issues. And what I mean, if you haven't seen our blogs about it, it quite literally means that if you go to the main GitHub repository or the documentation repository or any Symfony bundle or Symfony library that's commonly used in the Symfony ecosystem, create an issue, prefix it with DX. Sometimes we put left square bracket, DX, right square bracket, and that's it. Create an issue, put that DX prefix on there, and we will find it. Javier showed that dx.symfony.com tool this morning, which we ourselves are just starting to use. That actually goes out and harvests those issues. So if you create a DX issue on some third-party bundle, that's going to go into that main pipeline, and then we can give it attention and try to get resources to fix that developer experience problem. And ultimately, I want to move us towards ephemeralization, because I want us to do incredible things, and I want it to be easy. I want to be able to say, hey, when you solve this problem in Symfony, not only can you solve it pretty easily, it was actually really fun. I kind of want to solve it again. I'm gonna do git check out and undo my code and do the whole process again because it was that much fun. That's what we want. And ultimately, we're going to accomplish more with less. And that's it. Thank you guys very, very much.